Welcome to the Black Lodge Games review of Exalted 2nd Edition. Now, this is a very special book. This is a game that I played a lot in the mid and late 2000s, and it sits on my shelf staring at me like the mask from the Green Goblin, run me, Matt, you gotta play me. And I just haven't been able to bring myself to do it again. I have had so much fun playing this game in the past. It has produced some of the best memories that I have had in my entire role-playing career, I guess you would say, my experience in the hobby, and it is a tremendous amount of fun. There is so much to like about this game and so very much to dislike about it. This is a game that is fundamentally, it's broken in terms of the mechanics, which is unfortunate because it has such an incredible setting and such an incredible vision and idea of what it can be, but it's hampered by a lot of problems. Now, there is an errata for this game, this 2nd edition, that really fixes most of the issues that are in it, but that that errata is 150 pages or so, and it spans the entire game line. This is a game that the 2nd edition ran for, I think, almost a decade, and there are many, many, many source books with many new additional rules, and you have to really kind of know what's broken in the game in the first place to be able to make a decision about how to use the errata. So it's a little hard to get into, I would say. I think if you start playing Exalted just from the basic premise of the game and the low kind of essence levels, those early kind of levels, so to speak, your characters, you'll be fine, and it'll be a blast to play. There is a 3rd edition of this game out right now, and I really don't like it. There's a lot of problems with it. They took some things in Exalted 2nd Edition and made them better. There are some mechanical improvements, but then they took some aspects of this game and made them significantly worse. But the worst part of that is that they ditched the entire art aesthetic of Exalted 2nd Edition, which was excellent and communicated the vision of it, and have replaced it with a bunch of ugliness. And that is something that just makes it a non-starter for me. But today we're going to be talking about Exalted 2nd Edition, not 3rd Edition, and why you might actually still want to play this, and what are the things that I love about this game and I still can't get them out of my brain, and the reasons that still call me back to wanting to play this. So, Exalted takes place on a totally flat plane of a world. This is known as creation, and this map is the full extent of the world. It is not a globe. We are not a globe creation believer here. We are a flat creation believer because this is not a planet. This game takes inspiration from all sorts of different mythologies from across many different cultures in our real world. There's a lot of Greek mythology in here. There's a lot of different types of Asian mythologies in here. Everything kind of mixed up in this amazing blender to create this world. And the reason that this world is flat is essentially you have this kind of primordial backstory where these titan-like beings just out of the primordial chaos carved out and shaped reality into what it is. And it used to be much, much bigger, but through many wars, cataclysms, and things like that, the chaos has shrunk down that size of the world. There are still evil beings that, exist out in the wilds of the unshaped reality. But this is a very big place to adventure in. If you look down here, the scale for this map, 1 inch on this map is 800 miles. So this island in the middle of the world, the Blessed Isle, is not really an island. This is like a continent. This might be the size of maybe Russia or something. Maybe it's a little smaller. I don't know the exact scale of Russia, but it's enormous. And so any place that you're adventuring in this world, you can just stay in that tiny little area and have massive adventures. You're moving armies across the map and doing all of this, and you might never leave that little corner. Now, of course, as the Exalted, you are the chosen of the gods, and you have incredible powers at your disposal. And so you end up being able to travel all over this place as you progress through the game, and you get a really rich experience because this is just an incredible world to play in. It's so much fun. But I can't really tell you too much about the backstory of the game because that'll take too long. I tried doing that and it took about 20 minutes and I deleted that footage. So to give you the basic premise of the game, you play these guys. These are the Solar Exalted, the chosen of the unconquered sun, the greatest of all the celestial gods. You represent man's excellence, its peak in everything, in ability and skill and virtue and all of those things. And so you are incredibly powerful. You're the most powerful type of being in the world of Exalted. And this is awesome, but this does not mean that it is a cakewalk. You are surrounded on all sides by enemies. Essentially, at the start of the game, the premise of the game is that the Solar Exalted have returned to the world in massive numbers. You as a human being have done something so incredible. Your motivation is so much more epic than everyone else's that the Unconquered Sun says, you are my chosen, and you get a shard of his power and are then free to do with it what you want. However, the rest of the world, for reasons that are pertinent to the history of the in-world history of the game, believe that you are these kind of demonic entities. And so there is an entire religious institution known as the Wild Hunt, the Immaculate Order, that are constantly trying to find you and kill you and suppress you from becoming what you need to be. And they do have very real reasons for that. But the world has come to kind of a breaking point. The Scarlet Empress, the lady that controls this giant continent and therefore basically the rest of the world through her empire, has disappeared. And in her place, there is a massive power vacuum. All of the great houses of the dragon-blooded empire on this island are about to go to civil war. Their control basically evaporates around the world. And while this is all happening, while they're going to do their internal squabbles, the Solar Exalted return, but also these dark reflections of the Solar Exalted have propped up. These abyssal Exalted that are led by these titanic ghost kings known as the Death Knights, and they are wreaking havoc across the world. Demons are pouring out of hell. The fairy creatures from the outer chaos are flooding into the world, and it's a premise that has so much conflict built into it. It has political conflict, military conflict, mystical conflict, everything that you could imagine, that something will happen when you play this game. There's no way that you will start playing Exalted and you're not going to get yourself in trouble and have epic adventures. And that is the point of Exalted, is epic adventures. This is not an OSR game by any means, even system-wise or even the tone of it. It is not a game that is focused on starting off as the lowly, plucky adventurer and working your way up, maybe doing the adventurer, conqueror, king route. You start as a being that is potentially capable of doing a one-on-one combat with an army and winning. And it's phenomenal. It's a ton of fun, but there are lots and lots of things that can kill you in this game. It is still very, very deadly. But let's go through it here. So this is the kind of signature party of the Exalted. This is our signature character, Harmonious Jade. She appears, all of these characters appear throughout the text a lot. As you can see, it has this kind of anime style to it. And each chapter is going to have one of these interludes that has these very well done comics that give you kind of an idea of what the powers look like, what the characters are going to be up to, gives you different factions and whatnot to look at as you move through the text. And that style is in place for a reason, because the kind of action that you're going to be engaged in this is going to be on the scale of anime. It's the kind of crazy stuff where you're cutting demons in half and, you one punch someone and they are just obliterated. And the mystical conflicts are also going to be very much like you would see in a Japanese animated cartoon. And like I said, it draws on lots of different myths. Anime is a prime inspiration for the kind of aesthetic and vibe and how things play. But there's a lot of Chinese mythology, Greek mythology, and mythology from all over the place. It's fantastic. And they provide a lot of inspirations in the opening chapters to tell you exactly what are some points of reference if you want to know what is this game like, or what is a specific region in this game like. So here you can actually see this is one of the Abyssal Exalted fighting one of the Solar Exalted. He is a Dawn cast, and she is, I don't remember, it's maybe the Daybreaker cast or something, but they're the darkened version of the Solar Exalted. So whereas you are the most powerful beings in creation, they're this new thing. They even have the same markings that you do, and they are at an equal power level to you, and they are explicitly evil and looking to destroy all life. They're coming from the underworld, these kind of ghost lands. And so there's a kind of a mystery as to even what they are, but they are incredibly powerful enemies. They are peer combatants to you. And you get this great introduction. This is something, having gone over this again, I love the old White Wolf books. They were so good. They tell you exactly what the games are about. They give you the inspirations. They give you a giant lexicon at the beginning of the book, a glossary essentially that's going to tell you all of these different terms. It gives you a lot of background before you even jump into the introduction chapter or the setting chapter, and then gives you the suggested resources for inspiration on what this game is actually like. These were always really fantastic sections in the book. White Wolf, despite a lot of the shortcomings, and they did have some kind of philosophical errors about the nature of role-playing games in a lot of ways, they were always right about the character-focused nature of these games. And so even though this has this kind of wacky anime style to it, this is a great game for immersive roleplay. It's about your character, their motivations, their intimacies, the power that they wield. And it's a very character-focused thing. So this is something that I still really, really love this. Going into the next chapter, we have another one of those things, but then you get a giant chapter on the setting of this book. It tells you the entire kind of primordial backstory to the world that sets up the premise where you have just come back onto the stage at the moment that the world needs you most, and why everything is the way it is right now. And it's very in-depth, and this is one of the things where it's not, 30,000 years ago, X thing happened, and it has zero bearing on the game. All of this stuff actually does matter because your characters can live a very long time, but you also have visions of your past incarnations, this shard of power that has inhabited you. When you die, it's going to go out and find the next epic hero to inhabit that is worthy of its power. You get kind of dreams and glimpses of your past lives, so to speak, even though it might not be particularly your soul, but the past lives of the Exalted who shared that shard of power with you. And so that will kind of, it's an easy way for a storyteller, game master, for those of you who are not familiar with the White Wolf terminology, for the storyteller to kind of tease out some of the things that have happened throughout time and give a lot more context to who you're dealing with now, because a lot of the people that were alive and active in those times of myth are still alive. And you might actually have a history with them, and things that you did previously might matter a lot to them, and vice versa. But it tells you about the fall of the first solar empire, why it is that the solar Exalted disappeared from the face of the earth, what has happened when they returned, gives you the entire thing about the realm, the Blessed Isle, and the Scarlet Empire, who's led by the Scarlet Empress here, and we have the Rose Black. I don't remember this guy's name. It's not Pelops Delid. He's one of the fire. He's a fire aspected, dragon-blooded Exalted, and you have some sidereal Exalted over here as well. Although nobody technically knows that. It goes over the entire politics of the realm, and you can see here we have a battle between these are the terrestrial Exalted, the dragon-blooded Exalted. They're where the solar Exalted are all keyed to the sun in the kind of different kind of phases. You might have the eclipse cast, the night cast, the dawn cast, the twilight cast, and the zenith cast. The dragon-blooded are tied to the actual five physical elements of the earth and the kind of spiritual dragons that rule over them. So you have wood, earth, water, fire, and wind. And so when these Exalted start lighting off their powers, their power starts to bleed out of them, just as yours does, but theirs is in an elemental form. And so if you're a wood aspect, you're going to be, poisoning people around you. A fire aspect, you begin to burn with literal flames. And you as a solar Exalted are going to look a little bit more like Goku in Dragon Ball Z, where lightning and the power of the sun is radiating off of you and burning off of you to the point where it's you can see it for miles. It's like you're like some sort of solar flare Roman candle burning with this energy as you execute your magical powers and charms. It's really, really cool. But there are many different types of Exalted. You have three celestial types of Exalted: the solars, the lunars, and the chosen of the maidens, which are these kind of like fate-tied astrological celestial gods. And then you have the dragon-blooded terrestrial Exalted. And then you have the abyssal Exalted, which are the ones that are coming from the underworld. Nobody really knows what they are yet. And there are still others, more kind of niche Exalted. There is eventually the infernal Exalted, also equally powerful as the solars coming out from hell. All of this is tied together in this very, very cool setting and story that's going to give you a lot to work with. But you get the entire structure of the realm itself. It tells you how their governance works. It tells you a little bit about the different houses as well. It tells you about the Immaculate Order. These are the kind of state religion of the realm that has been responsible for hunting down and killing your kind, the Solar Exalted. And then it goes out to the different areas of of the map. And this is just going to be just like a compass. We have to the west, when you get farther towards the elemental pole of water, land starts disappearing. You're getting into infinite ocean. The east, the elemental pole of wood. These are endless forests. The elemental pole of fire in the south, endless sands and deserts until it becomes just fire and smoke and magma and things that you can't even, the closer you get to that elemental pole, the stronger the influence it is on that terrain. And air, of course, being this frozen wasteland. And so there's cities all throughout this place, different regions, and it gives you a breakdown on those different areas of the map. Also a breakdown of how the realm works and what it has at its disposal, its mystical resources and its technological resources, which are vast. They have things from the first age that are like giant mecha suits like you would see from Escaflowne called War Striders. They've got essence cannons and all these things. So there is a Magitech aspect to this, but these are resources that are eventually depleted by the Empire over time, because without the Solar Exalted to maintain their creations, the Dragon-Blooded are relying on these things to kind of repair them where and when they can, but they can't recreate those wonders of the first age under the solar rule. Only you and your characters could do that. But then you get into the threshold. There's, like I said, these other regions. Big, it's not just flavor text. This is telling you about the history of the region, the societies that are there, the cities that you can find and adventure in. And so this is a very significant chapter, and this is going to be really important for the GM, not just to read, but you'll be referencing it a lot, because depending on where your players go, you're going to have to know what's out there. And they did, of course, White Wolf did, of course, write supplements for each of those terrestrial directions and all these major places. They made source books for those that went into much, much greater detail. So if you were focused on one of those areas, picking up one of those books was always very useful. And they were super fun to read. There's so much interesting stuff, so many interesting characters and places to go and adventure in. But you can absolutely run the game setting-wise based on what is in the core book. When you get past that, this is one of our Twilight Cast characters, our signature character. And I believe this is a piece by Melissa Uren, I believe, who did a lot of art in Exalted. She's done a lot of the black and white pieces in some of the other source books as well. This is the Twilight Cast signature character who's basically stealing this ancient spellbook grimoire. And so the Twilight Cast are very focused on sorcery and technology and crafting and all of this different, those kind of cool things. You get a character creation section, which is going to give you not only the rules for character creation, but a lot of the important things that you're going to need for coming up with an actual character, someone with a concept, a little bit of a backstory. You have to come up with things like your intimacies. These are things that are these kind of core emotional touchstones that your character has. These are the things they are passionate about. So they might be similar to something, if you're coming from like BRP or Mithras, similar to the passions mechanic, but they're tied into the mechanics of this game in different ways. You also have to choose a motivation for your character. And now this is not, well, the orcs came and killed my brother, so my motivation is to go take revenge on the orcs. No. That's a motivation that is appropriate for a normie, for a normal human, someone who is average. You're not average. You are the Exalted. Your motivation is something like, I want to conquer heaven. I want to become the unconquered sun, or I want to kill the gods, or I want to restore the wonders of the first age, or I want to create the first empire that spans all of creation. You know, something like that. It's a motivation worthy of an anime version of like Gilgamesh or Hercules or something like that. You know, you have to go really, really over the top with it. And that is your primary motivating factor. And you want to come up with a big one. And your motivation isn't simply a character or a story thing. That actually ties into the mechanics. And when we get to some of the mechanics, my motivation got my character killed, and not in the way that you're probably anticipating. But this is all really good stuff. This tells you how to build the character mechanically, but it's also, like I said, the White Wolf games, they were really, really good about this, about how to actually come up with a good character. They're an excellent training ground for good role players. Yeah, exactly. We have questions and answers. How old are you? Where are you from? What was your family life like? When did you meet your companions? How has power changed you? What do you think of mortals now that you're a demigod, basically? Who or what do you worship? What would drive you to commit murder? These are important questions because you're probably going to kill a lot of people in this game. There is the option to play Grim and Gritty as playing humans, and there's also heroic mortals and things like that. I think it would be completely stupid to play this game that way because everything that you run into will be so absurdly overpowered. But it's like, why would I play if this is the game where I get to do the ultimate power fantasy? I'm the demigod. I have incredible magics at my disposal. Why would I just want to play a normie in that world? It'd be like playing a peasant in Warhammer 40K or something instead of a Space Marine, you know? And then you get a nice spread that's a 2-page character creation summary, gives you all the bonus point costs for upgrading your character. This is a total point buy system. You get a certain number of attributes, dots that you add to your attributes, a certain number that you add to your skills, and then you can buy more based on a certain pool of freebie points you have, or you can buy charms, other sorts of things like that. So your character is going to come out fairly unique. However, it's not totally unguided. There is a sense of class that you have in Exalted, similar to something like Dungeons and Dragons, while still being fully a skill-based game. Showing off one of these casts, and this is my favorite art spread in the entire book, we have Harmonious Jade, our beautiful Nightcast hero, who is being pursued by some sort of demon on like a mechanical wasp thing, and using her essence-enhanced arrow, using her charm. You can see her cast mark glittering on her forehead. She fires this arrow and absolutely blows the fuck out of this guy. He explodes. She wins. And it's badass. She's like a crazy ninja because she is one of the night cast. When you come to choose your cast, this is going to be the archetype that you are playing. The dawn cast are essentially the fighter, the warlord, the person who is going to lead troops and go ferociously into battle and be the best at that on like a metaphysical level almost. You have the Zenith cast, which are the priest kings of the Solars. They can make sure that the restless dead don't come back to life. Creatures of darkness totally fear them when they start burning off their powers and their anima banner starts to radiate off of them. Creatures of darkness are completely afraid of them, and I think it even goes farther than that, in which you're doing like aggravated damage to them and things like that. You have the Twilight cast, who is going to be sort of like your mage or your scholar, your engineer, those types of things, very into sorcery. And I love the art in this book. And it's if you compare this art to what's in the new Exalted 3rd Edition books, there is simply no contest. This is so much better. You have the Night cast, my favorites, the assassins and ninjas and thieves, people who can, walk amongst crowds, steal things out of plain sight, basically do anything undetected. They can shoot you from a mile away with an arrow, all sorts of wild, crazy stuff. Jump over mountains, run on walls, run on water or on the spear points. Like you can do things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And then you have the Eclipse cast, who are more of like your negotiators, your bureaucrats. And they have very potent powers as well, but you're not locked in, while each cast is going to give you a certain set of skills that you have to devote certain amounts of skill points to that are associated with your cast. Like the Night cast is going to have a lot of things like athletics and stealth, skills like that. When you make your character and you choose your cast, your character also has certain skills that are individual to them outside of their cast that function in the same ways that these do. Because when your cast skills, as you kind of progress and spend experience points to upgrade them, they are much cheaper to upgrade than are the non-cast skills. And so you get a set of personal skills where you kind of customize your character. So you can have the ninja character, who is an insane stealthy ninja who's also a sorcerer, or who is also a warlord and a general. You can do that. You get a lot of freedom there. And that is one thing that I really very much enjoy about this game and this style of character building. The cost is, though, this is a cost of all the White Wolf games. This is a heavy point buy character creation system. You're going to have to spend some time on this. It is not fast to make a character here. And part of that is also because you're going to have to choose certain charms and abilities, your magical powers that are based on your skills. And there's a lot of them. And you start with a lot of them. I think you start with 10. We'll get to the charms in a bit. But then it tells you about, choosing your virtues and how these things interact with the Great Curse. Because Like I said, the world, the religion, they say the Solar Exalted are demons. You know, they do terrible things and we must destroy them. And they're not entirely wrong. Due to events in the prior ages, the Solar Exalted did the impossible and killed the Titans. You know, they killed the primordial gods, and by doing so, they basically created the underworld out of nothing. This big hole ripped out in reality because the weight of the Titans, their death. It's not something that reality itself could even comprehend. So the souls of these titanic monsters fell down into the abyss, and their last act before they fell into this abyss forever was to lash out and curse all of the Exalted, these champions of the gods. And this curse affects the Exalted according to the tier of power level that they're at. The Solars being at the top, they are affected by the Great Curse the most. So they are doomed over time to go insane. When a Solar Exalted goes insane, when someone who has abilities and powers that could potentially melt continents or destroy worlds, when they go insane, it's very, very bad for everyone. But you're not always dealing with this. Your curse conditions only come in under certain conditions associated with your virtues. My character, Wrathful Jade, not Harmonious Jade, Wrathful Jade, who was also a Nightcast. Funny enough, I chose a conviction flaw. My character had a conviction flaw, which essentially made it so if he was ever backed into a corner, he'd have to roll for limit. And limit is a rating that tracks until you have a breaking moment, a limit break, where the curse takes over and you kind of lose it. And so his conviction flaw, when he was backed into a corner enough times, eventually he has a limit break, and his conviction flaw made it so his limit break is not like he just breaks down and has like crazy emotional spirals. He had what is called intolerable cruelty. So whatever his goal was, he would murder, he would torture, he would do anything with zero remorse whatsoever to see that goal happens. And this is so much fun when it happens in play. Not just this particular flaw, but when the limit break happens, because this is something that all of the White Wolf games do great. Is your characters, they always have something like in Vampire, you can frenzy, you know, like you can lose control. You sort of do lose control in these instances, and you have to role play in accordance with that. And it's so much fun because it throws such a wrench into everyone's plans, and it creates completely unpredictable outcomes in stories. And it also gives you a little bit of PvP just baked into the game, because when someone has a limit break, you have to kind of keep them contained. Like the lowest kind of limit break that you can have is essentially a character who is inconsolable. They break down, and like it could be in the middle of a battle. It doesn't matter. Woe is me. The state of the world is so bad. And they just sit there weeping inconsolably as their friends all die in battle. Or you can have someone who has a temperance flaw, and the temperance flaw could give you something like total gluttony. When you have a limit break, it's a huge Dionysian orgy, you know, and you're going around, you're eating and you're drinking and you're having sex, you're doing everything. It's like you're Bender when he became a human in Futurama, and he's like, I want to eat nachos and go to the bathroom at the same time. It's like, that's you. Like you completely lose it. And this causes a bunch of new story hooks to be developed because you cause so many problems. And this curse, of course, solving the great curse, that would be a motivation worthy of an Exalt, because the Solar Exalted are powerful enough that they could conceivably reverse this. They were created to do the impossible, and they have done the impossible many times. And the world is in the most dire straits that it's ever been in, and they need characters to go out and do the impossible again. And so it's a lot of fun. I love this stuff. This is all, it makes for just incredible experiences at the table. Like I said, I have had some of my most memorable memories of any experience in a role-playing game. Probably half of them are from Exalted. It's so good. And so there's valor flaws as well. You know, of course, berserk anger. Maybe you're just going, it's not that you're so convicted that I have to go through and methodically torture to get my goals. It's no, I just kill everyone around me. And because I'm a Dawn cast and I have the best combat abilities, I do it. It's awesome. It's so much fun. I love this stuff. Then it goes through all the different cast abilities and what they actually do, what they're how to use them, the different backgrounds you can have. These are very standard from the White Wolf games, things like contacts, a manse, which basically is like kind of a fortress, a mystical fortress that you have at your disposal. Resources is how much money you have. This is all pretty standard for anyone who's played a White Wolf game. Money is very heavily abstracted in your resources trait. There is some accounting that you can do later on in the game. They talk about the jade money standard, the jade, like different jade talents, what the value is, all that stuff. But the White Wolf games tend not to focus on that. And I think sometimes that is actually kind of to their detriment. It goes over your essence rating, which is kind of your overall potency. It ranges from 1 to 5 in the base game, but Solar Exalted can go up to 10, possibly more, who knows? And how you use your motes of essence, basically your magic points, to power your powers. You have a personal pool of essence and a peripheral pool. The personal pool are the points of essence that you have your own personal mastery over. If you use these points to use your supernatural abilities, they don't cause you to glow or burn with energy or anything. Once you run out of those and you move on to your peripheral pool, though, you're going to start burning that energy and people are going to see it. You're going to light up like a solar flare, which also makes it very hard to get away from the wild hunt. And then we have drama and systems. Now, White Wolf games, a lot of people have considered them relatively rules light compared to something like Dungeons and Dragons or many other systems, maybe heavier mechanical systems. This is not a rules light game. In particular, Exalted is a very, very crunchy game. And it's crunchy, I think, in some ways that are not that good. This is kind of where things start to crumble. Because everything I've been talking about, so much fun. The roleplay, the setting, the idea, the concept. It's great. This uses the same dice pool system that you're going to see in something like Vampire the Masquerade. You have 3 dots in an attribute and 5 dots in a skill for a given roll. You roll 8 10-sided dice. But of course, it doesn't actually work out that way because you're going to have lots of magical abilities that can boost that dice pool to absolutely absurd levels. And there's even a way that you can boost your dice pool without using any magical powers at all. And this is something I love. This is a mechanic I miss so much. It's called stunting because you're going to do stunts during combat. And the way it works is if I just say, I walk up to the guy and I hit him with my sword, that's an attack. Okay, fine. You can roll your dice. You're not getting a bonus for that. But if you say, I run up and I jam my sword through his heart, then that's going to give you 1 stunt die. That means your dice pool increases by 1 die. You have a better chance at succeeding at this now. If I do something really crazy, like I say, I do a backflip off of the altar, but while I'm doing the backflip, I land on the shoulders of one guy and then jump off of him, and then I stab the next guy in the heart, that might be a 2 dice stunt because you're getting really descriptive, really into it. You're starting to use the environment. You get 2 extra dice. A 3 dice stunt is where you describe some attack that is so absurd and like impossible in the way that you're using the scenery and doing all of these things that if there's any question whether or not it's a 3 dice stunt, it's not a 3 dice stunt. And so this increases your ability to succeed. But if you succeed, you actually recover essence and magic points based on how many stunt die you got. It's 2 motes of essence per die. And so basically it's like you do something completely absurd and you succeed at it and the universe goes, that was awesome. And it rewards you. And that's kind of part of the metaphysics of the world. It's not just a fun mechanic. It's literally like the universe rewarding you for being epic. It's fucking awesome. But when you combine charms that can increase your dice pool with stunts, and then if you do something like combos, which are going to be combinations of many magical abilities that you have poured experience into to make into a single action. It's like a signature move that you do. That can make your dice pool absolutely retardedly big, and it can also slow things down considerably. We understand the dice pool. It's attribute plus skill. Roll your dice. Maybe you're rolling some other things. It doesn't use opposed rolls for the most part. It does use more of a static defense value. So whereas in Vampire the Masquerade, you might be doing something like, okay, I roll my dodge and dexterity versus your attack, and we're both making rolls. That's not how it works here. You are going to calculate static defense values. And your static defense values are going to be applied to combat and to mental combat, because there are 2 kinds, social combat and actual combat. And so you have a a parry defense value and a dodge defense value, and a mental parry defense value and a mental dodge defense value. And you can manipulate those through role play, through stunting, through using your charms, everything. So those values, they're called static. They're really not. And they can change a lot. And so we're going to kind of skip through some of this stuff. We do have the rule of 10. If you roll a 10-sided die and you roll a 10, that's 2 successes instead of 1. But when you get to, like, there's this huge section on bonuses, how the different actions work, multiple actions, reflexive actions, automatic success on things, how to do disguises, and it goes through basically all the different skill sets and different types of things that you can do. You'll eventually get to the actual combat section. The base system of rolling skills to do actions, that's pretty solid. It does work. When you start integrating all of the charms, which we'll get to next, the kind of magical powers, that's where the issues with the rules start to come in. And it's not just that, oh, I don't prefer this. It's that the rules actually suck and are broken. And in many cases can be like almost unplayable in some ways. And that becomes a bigger problem as you progress through the game and get more powerful. But combat has some issues that I just don't like on a system level. Like this way of tracking time, you basically, the round moves forward in a series of ticks. And you can kind of think of it just as like the clock ticking forward, that hand moving forward. Each action that you take, whether you're doing, a dash or a charge or you're attacking with a weapon, is going to have a certain speed rating. And it's how many ticks it takes to do that, essentially. And it's going to be that many ticks before you can take another action. So if I have a tiny little short sword, my speed rating is going to be lower than that of a guy with a giant, like Cloud Strife Buster Sword, Diclave. So I'm going to be able to attack more often than he can. But you're tracking this in these ticks instead of... it's just fucking annoying. I hate it. Even thinking about it right now, I'm getting angry about remembering how to do this. I really, really, really hate the initiative system in this. And this is an area where Exalted 3rd Edition, it was a massive improvement. Even though I don't really like that game, it was an improvement over this, and I really don't like it. And so this is where things start to get very, very crunchy. You also have these different actions, activated charm, aim, attack, dash, flurry, guard, inactive, miscellaneous actions, and move. These all have these speed ratings. Many of them are varies because it depends on the different action. There's a lot to keep track of and think about with these things. You can do flurries, multiple attacks. But then we get to the order of attack events. This will tell you exactly how absurd an Exalted combat round is going to be. You declare your action. Then the defender declares their response. Then I make an attack roll. Then I might not like that roll. If I used all my charms and I say, I really actually don't like that roll, but I have an ability that allows me to re-roll it, I can re-roll all of that. I subtract any external penalties from all the successes that I've rolled and apply any special defenses that the opponent has. But then the opponent, after doing all of that, might say, you know what? I don't like the way that played out. I have powers that allow me to re-roll. So then he can re-roll. At this point, we finally resolved whether or not I have hit you and how badly I have hit you. That's going to calculate our raw damage of the attack. But then we have these other traits, apply hardness and soak, and then roll damage. Hardness and soak are abilities that are going to allow you to reduce damage that are coming into you. And here's the thing. You have charms and magical abilities that can manipulate that and that can cause this to play out differently. Then I'll roll damage and it gets applied to the opponent. But then the opponent might have counterattacks, and then we'll basically go through steps 1 through 9 again to resolve their counterattacks, and then we'll apply the results and we're done. So there's so much that can happen in this because of the way that this action economy works and because of the way that the charms work, is that combat really, really goes slow sometimes. Just because of the amount of powers that are in play. This is a game with an enormous number of powers that you can use and that you have at your disposal, and they're very cool and they're very fun, but it's a lot. This is a very heavy game. And like I said, while it's fun, there's a significant cost here. And even bigger cost is that if you just read the core book, you're not going to know what's broken and not until you read the errata. But yeah, we have tons of, attacking inanimate objects, unstable footing, all of the things that you're going to see in most of these other game systems. that account for a more kind of a simulationist thing. They're all present here. And then you have extras, because when you are Genghis Khan, but imbued with the power of the sun, and you fight a normie, if you hit them, they're dead. That's what an extra is. They're like an extra in a movie. And this is not a means of like, oh, let's make it more cinematic. This actually, in my opinion, is a way of modeling how your character would be functioning in the world, because you will have peer combatants and you will have opponents that wield big magical powers and things against you, but you're also going to be wading through hordes and hordes of normies, and thematically and mechanically, they just can't stand up to you, and that's fine. The idea that you can take on an entire army by yourself is a real thing in this game, and it's built into the assumptions of the game. And they do have a morale system, which is, as far as I can remember, I've never seen that in another White Wolf game, which is kind of crazy, because this was during a time too when Dungeons and Dragons didn't have morale rules anymore. That was something that got thrown out in like 3rd or 4th edition. And so there's a lot of people who will say, oh, Exalted was this like story game and it was like so immature. Shut up. You're all wrong. You know who I'm talking about. This game is actually significantly crunchier than D&D of contemporary D&D of the time. And it even has a mass combat system. Now, this is a system I never personally used, and I've talked to people who have used it, and they said, yes, as long as you're using the errata, it works. You're going to need spreadsheets, though. That to me is a non-starter. I don't want to bust out the spreadsheets, and the units all have a lot of different traits you have to keep track of. They all matter. All of this stuff. This plays out over long ticks, and so they have all of these different combat actions that you can take in mass combat where you're moving the troops around. I would actually be interested to try this again. There is an entire section on fielding armies and running wars, which is very, very cool, and something that I don't think D&D at the time was really offering in a core book. I'm sure that there was like 3rd edition and 4th edition supplements for this, but it was in the core book, which is amazing. And so they have the social combat. And again, we're going to have the same fucking thing with all these actions have different speeds, and social combat is actually fun in this game. And it's not a replacement for role playing, because you're using really dastardly charms to mind control people and do things like that. It's very, very fun. And just the overwhelming power of your magical charisma to get what you want. And some of the charms that are used for that are very, very funny. There's one that I believe works on crowds called Husband Seducing Demon Dance. They're very funny charm names, and the descriptions are excellent. We'll get to those in just a moment, but you can make written attacks, and there are social units, and there's a lot there. And so it's a very crunchy system all the way through. Charms, combos, and sorcery. These are your powers. And to get... We'll show you there are trees basically outlining all of the powers that are associated with a given skill, because each skill has a tree of powers. So if we start here with like archery, you have to start with a basic archery charm known as an excellency. And then when you have that excellency, you have 2 paths that you can go down, and you can explore all paths depending on how much experience you have. And each charm is going to have certain requirements, an essence requirement and your skill requirement. So if I had an archery excellency and then I wanted to get trance of unhesitating speed, I would have to be at an essence level of 2. That's my overall power level. And I would have to have 3 skill dots in archery in order to qualify to have this charm. And then from there, I can get Arrow Storm Technique or Flashing Vengeance Draw. This is all fairly simple explaining how to get charms. The excellencies are your general charms for a skill, and they function the same way. You have the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd excellency for all skills. What they allow you to do, 1st excellency allows you to add dice to your dice pool. For every, if you can basically double the dice pool that you have at your disposal by spending 1 mote per die to get extra dice. The 2nd excellency doesn't do more dice on your roll. What it does is it adds automatic successes to the roll. So if I spend 2 motes of essence, I get an additional success on the roll. And I can spend up to my dice pool in motes of essence to do that. So I could either double my dice pool, or I could spend the same amount of essence and get half of those dice as successes. The 3rd excellency allows me to re-roll a roll that I didn't like. And this is not a cheat. In some games, it's not like a luck point. This is an ability that you have because you are the chosen of the gods and you can manipulate fate. When you use essence, you are interfering with destiny and making your own destiny and making destiny shape to you. So this is a real thing within the world of the game. But the charms, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of named powers. And this is an area where things get a little tricky because there's so many of them. They all have different keywords, and they can, if you start combining them into combos later on, it can make for a very, very slow moving action in the game just because there's so many moving parts. This is an area where Exalted 3rd Edition made it worse because they made more charms. The archery charms have 13 charms for archery in Exalted 1st Edition. In Exalted 3rd Edition, there are 40. There's at least 35 that I know of for Exalted 3rd Edition. It's too many. It's too many. And that's for every single skill. 30 to 50 charms in a tree is absurd. That book is something like 600 pages, and like 350 pages of that is charms and sorcery and combos. It's ridiculous. That's unplayable in my opinion. This is playable if you use the errata with it, because this is the charms are really where the game breaks down a little bit without the errata. They're a ton of fun though. They have all sorts of great flavorful descriptions. Like I'll find my favorite one. Yes, the larceny charms. These are some nightcast charms that are very, very fun. We have door evading technique. Only the unrighteous would lock a door to keep the lawgivers out. Such an intention is proof of iniquity. Then it tells you how the charm works, and basically you can step through doors. Or you have stealing from plain sight spirit. This charm is an attempt to steal something in plain sight. The character must be able to carry the item, and the character cannot steal things in active use, including like attuned artifacts, things like that. But it would be like you walk into the temple and the guards are all standing around like the monkey statue that is, it's on this big dais or whatever. And I could walk in and I could just grab it and walk out. Because I'm that stealthy and that's how my powers work. It's very, very fun. And there's a lot of flavor in all of these. Like I said, in the socialization charms, there's, if I can find it, there is husband seducing demon dance, diatribe inflicting method. There's all sorts of crazy stuff. You can alter like beliefs and taboos in society simply by giving like awful screeds on the street. Like it's very fun. The athletics charms allow you to leap over mountains. Like I said, you can do the crouching tiger, hidden dragon stuff. It's really great. It's a ton of fun in play, but there is the price of this being kind of a broken system and it being pretty heavy. So it's not for everybody, but it is. I keep saying this. It's just so much fun. It's just so much fun. It's speaking to me now as the Green Goblin telling me to run the game. And once you get past all this, and there's a lot of like the sorcery is extremely powerful and extremely cool, and that's broken down by the power level. The Dragon-Blooded have their sorcery, and then above that there's the Celestial level sorcery, and then the most powerful is the Solar sorcery. It's very cool. There's mystical martial arts styles that allow you to do all sorts of stuff. Again, broken down by terrestrial, solar, but above that is actually sidereal martial arts. The most potent martial arts you can learn, but you have to learn them from a different type of exalt. But where the game, I think, really kind of falls apart, we have the storytelling advice. Some of this is good, some of this is bad. It's always a mixed bag with the White Wolf games. Where it really starts to fall apart, though, for me, is this antagonist chapter. And as a GM, this is something where things are really... It's a tough game to run, partially because of the rule set, partially because the most interesting enemies that you're going to find in the world of Exalted are the other Exalted. Every single Exalted type gets their own source book over the course of the span of this game. So you get the Solar Exalted. You have all those charms. Those are just the Solar Exalted. The Dragon-Blooded have their own skills, charms. The Sidereal Exalted have their own skills and charms. And the Lunar Exalted have theirs as well. And so it's like, if you have those books, it can be a lot of fun to bring those in as antagonists, the other types of Exalted, because they're going to be the most important characters that you're always running into. But you don't get enough here to know how to run them. You get some example Exalted. Basically, it'll tell you how do the excellencies, the first, second, and third excellencies work for the Dragon-Blooded. How do they work for the Lunars? How do they work for the Sidereals? And then they'll give you a few NPCs, a few sample antagonists from that Exalt type that sort of have some unique powers, but it doesn't give you anything about the rest of the powers for the rest of the Exalted types. in any sort of detail. So for running this long term, these NPC examples in the antagonist section of this book are not going to cut it. And the other thing is, and this is a deep flaw of the White Wolf way of doing things, there are no random encounters at all. And random encounters are so absolutely useful, and they're just absent from here. It's like, I don't know, what am I more likely to run into in various parts of the world? I can find that by looking at the different monster types. Like they have different mortal people that you can fight. This is basically a bestiary. You have beastmen, so you can have your orcs and weird fucked up monster people. Creatures of the wild are going to be like the fair folk, and there's a bunch of stat blocks in here as well. But also these stat blocks are fucking huge. They give you a fair amount of flavor text, but then there's just tons and tons and tons of stuff to look at and account for in here. And I do like the art. And again, I think this is Mel Uren did this. And there's a lot of them. But then you get finally to gods, because there aren't just the celestial gods. There are gods for everything. There's a god for this book. There's a god for this table. There's a god of your home. Every single physical thing in the world has a small god associated with it. And the more abstract and the bigger things are, the more powerful those gods are. And you can have people who are the children of humans and gods intermixing. And so there's a lot to deal with here. There's a lot of spirits, and there are demons and different sorts of things. There are a lot of antagonists to run straight out of this book. But like I said, there's no random encounters to add that variety and to give you the GM tools to just run a low preparation game. This is a fairly high prep game for a lot of people. This is a game that really tested my mettle, and this is where my zero prep or low prep gaming was forged, was in this game, because the characters are so powerful, and if you have unpredictable players like mine were, you can't plan. You really can't, because they can do anything. And so this really forces you to get really good at improvising. But at the same time, that is hard. And that is hard to learn. And I was happy to go through that crucible. It was a lot of fun doing that. A lot of people are not going to find that fun. And this is something where older versions of Dungeons and Dragons and newer games like Shadow Dark, being full of random encounter tables, and Axe in particular as well has really good encounter tables. Having encounter tables and terrain generation and all of these tools that have been around in the hobby forever, they're just totally absent, and they would so help this game run smoothly if you just had those tools, and they're completely absent from this game. But you also do have some very powerful antagonists. The demon Octavian was great. He backed me into a corner, which caused me to have a limit break. It was excellent. The Blood Apes, I love them. The Abyssals, and eventually there will be a section in here about, we have the undead, of course, the hungry ghosts. This is the Mask of Winters. He is a Death Lord. For low-level characters, unkillable foe. He has every single solar charm in the book at his disposal. He's an Essence 10 character, has perfect defenses, has more allies than you can possibly believe, and more mystical power at his disposal. He is the kind of thing that can be like the BBEG, as they say in the slop videos, the big bad evil guy, but he'll just be one of many. And eventually he might become a peer, because you might become as powerful as him. But then you get to the Exalted section, and these are the most interesting characters that you're going to run into and that you're going to want to make your antagonists. And it's a very lacking section, in my opinion. It just doesn't give you enough. And part of that was the business strategy. They wanted to sell more books, and they did sell more books. And when I was first started playing this in the mid-2000s, my friend who was running it had all the first edition books. So knowing how the core system worked, he was able to use his old Abyssals book, to actually draw from and know how to run an Abyssal in this game. But if I had just started just with this book, I wouldn't have known how to do that on my own. Not really. They give you some example, but it's not enough, because once you get those books, they're so good. And so there is a ton of stuff. When we eventually get to the Abyssal Exalted, we have this wonderful full-page piece of the signature Abyssal circle of Exalted. They're awesome. They're so cool. Big boobs, gorgeous. They're even though they're evil, they're smiling. In the new edition, everyone is sneering at you. It's terrible, and I'm not joking. We've gone over the art on one of our videos, and you'll have sections on equipment, your panoply, all the artifacts you can get. There are also, back here before we get here, there is sort of the kind of mundane Exalted you can run into. They have solar exalts you can run into. But you have animals. I'd like to have random encounter tables for running into this stuff as well, and it's just not there. The equipment section is very fun. There's a lot of interesting artifacts that your characters can use that enhance your powers. You have the old weapons from the Age of Legend that you're almost certainly going to have. You can choose them as a background, so you start with one, or you can recover them throughout play. Either way, you're probably going to end up with some titanically huge weapon, absurd anime-style weapon that you can use to plow through tons and tons and tons of enemies. And so this is pretty much the end of the book. And I love this game. I absolutely love it. I do want to play it again someday, but man, there's just problems. The lack of zero prep tools is almost a non-starter for me now. I don't want to have to spend so much mental energy thinking stuff up on my own. I want to be able to just draw on tools in the book, but really it's knowing a little bit of how the system works and what is broken. I don't want to have to incorporate a 150-page errata document into it. It still calls to me. It's the Green Goblin mask staring me at from the shelf. It just, I can't get rid of it. I want to play it because I do remember that despite everything that I've said that I did not like about this game that really makes it a non-starter, I have those memories of playing it and I know how fun it is, and it just drives me crazy because I want to have those experiences again. And so there is a game, not second edition, not third edition Exalted. It's not even Exalted, that I will be playing in place of this. And that is Joel T. Clark's Lone Wolf Fists, which is sort of a spiritual successor to Exalted in some ways. And we will talk about that at a later time. Thank you so much for watching.